Impressionism started off in late 19th century in France. Even though the Impressionist artists were criticized by the conventional art community, they had continued to become famous during the 1870s till the 1880s through their own independent exhibitions. Impressionism was a result of when in Paris Napoleon III began war, and at the time religious and historical paintings were leading. Impressionism was a sort of rebellion against that kind of art. The main reason critics at that time were against Impressionist art is because they said they had no feel and no real meaning to it. Impressionist paintings generally have small, thin brushstrokes with a lot of importance put to the light and the changing qualities in the light. Normally, the paintings are very normal and mundane human visual experiences. Impressionist paintings are made up of short, thick strokes to capture the essence of the light. Colors are added side by side, while not entirely mixing them in order to create a lively feel to the painting. Proper Impressionist painters would avoid using the color black in order to keep the edges of their paintings soft. And wet paint would be added on top of wet paint without allowing the initial first wet paint to dry. Impressionism was the first movement of the whole modernism age. It's what kick-started all the other movements at that time. Some notable Impressionist artists are Claude Monet, who pretty much started the whole Impressionist movement, and Auguste Renoir. Post-Impressionism was the art movement that came right after Impressionism, hence the Post-Impressionism. The term Post-Impressionism was used by a critic called Roger Fry. He used it to describe how the art had developed since the artist Edouard Manet in the exhibition he organized, which was called Manet and the Post-Impressionists. Post-Impressionism is quite similar to Impressionism, except it is not affected by the same limitations. They still use vivid colors while still being quite random with it, and the painting style is still exactly the same, and real subject matter is still included, except there is more emphasis on the geometric distortion of the image for a more expressive effect. Some very notable post-impressionist artists would be Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin. Expressionism was initially a German movement, and it was mainly just poetry and painting, but it did later on expand to literature, theater, dance, film, architecture, and music. After post-impressionism, a lot of artists wanted to express more emotion in their artwork rather than having very realistic paintings. So in expressionist paintings, reality is completely excluded. The paintings are more about what the artist wants the watcher to feel and what moods they want to express through those paintings. The beginning of Expressionism allowed artists to branch out into different types of art movements, all involving more expression in them and emotions, and it allowed for the beginning of more surrealistic art. Two very famous Expressionism artists are Ernest Ludwig and Fritz Blel. Fauvism, or Les Fauves, which means the wild beasts in French, had begun in the 1900s and continued after 1910. Although the movement itself had only lasted 3 exhibitions and lasted a few years, from 1904 to 1908. Fauvism has its similarities to Impressionism, as it keeps the realistic and simplistic values of the visual image, while using vibrant colors in order to express emotions. The term Les Fauves had come from a critic, Louis Vauchel, when he went to the first Fauvism exhibition in 1905 in Paris. Fauvism wasn't a proper movement. It was more of a few artists getting together and using colors in order to express their emotions in their paintings. Though by 1908, Fauvism had helped create Cubism. Fauvism was created by the two artists Henri Matisse and André Derain. Futurism mainly originated from Italy, though there were movements at the same time going on in Russia and England and in other places. Futurists were in every medium of art, that being paintings, sculptures, graphic design, industrial design, interior design, urban design, theater, film, fashion, textiles, literature, music, architecture, and even gastronomy. Futurism had been a big influence to a lot of other art movements as well, such as Art Deco, Constructivism, Surrealism, Dada, and the three most important isms, Precisionism, Realism, and Vorticism. Futuristic artists hate everything old. They like having speed, technology, and violence in their art. Two of the key figures of the futuristic movement are Carlo Cara and Filippo Marinetti. Cubism was a early 20th century art movement which was led by the very famous Pablo Picasso and Georges. Cubism is arguably one of the most influential art movements in the 20th century. It revolutionized European painting, sculpture, music, literature, and architecture. The reason Cubism is seen as such an influential movement is because before, when an artist would paint a picture, they would look at it from just one point of view, while a Cubist artist would look at a picture from different points of view and then paint what he sees from all those different points of view. Cubism itself is a three-dimensional art. There were two phases in the Cubist movement. The first phase being the analytic phase, which went on from 1907 to 1912, and after that came the synthetic phase, which was from 1913 all the way till 1920s. The analytic phase was very limited. Colors used by Cubist artists were mainly black, brown, gray, and off-whites. And then in the synthetic phase, more brighter colors were used, as well as different surfaces and textures, giving it a very decorative effect. Geometric abstraction is a form of abstract art which uses basic geometrical shapes in order to portray things that we see daily in our lives. Throughout the 20th century, critics and artists have claimed that geometrical abstraction is the height of non-objective art. Non-objective art is basically art that does not represent a person, place, or thing in it. Geometric abstraction is not necessarily a result of the modernism time period of art. For example, in Islamic art, religious figures are banned. Therefore, a lot of Islamic artists began to do pattern-based geometric art. Also during this time, science and math were taking quite large strides. For example, during this time, Einstein came up with his theory of general relativity.